The biblical narrative opens with the account of creation, describing the origins of the universe, the earth, and all life forms. According to the text, the creation unfolds in a sequential process, beginning with the formation of the heavens and the earth and the separation of light from darkness. The creation account situates the earth within a broader cosmological framework, reflecting early Near Eastern conceptions of the world as an ordered structure emerging from a primordial state. The initial human beings, Adam and Eve, are described as the first members of humanity, placed within a designated area known as the Garden of Eden. This locale, often identified with regions of southern Mesopotamia, is depicted as a fertile and irrigated zone, consistent with archaeological evidence for early riverine civilizations that relied on controlled irrigation for agriculture. The text describes Adam and Eve as responsible for the stewardship of this environment, with moral and social obligations imposed through divine instruction. The narrative emphasizes the human capacity for choice, with consequences arising from disobedience. The expulsion from Eden introduces mortality, labor, and social complexity, marking the transition from an idealized human existence to one embedded within environmental and social constraints. The genealogy following the expulsion outlines the descendants of Adam, detailing successive generations through figures such as Cain and Abel. Cain's act of fratricide against Abel is the first recorded instance of human conflict, reflecting social tensions within early communities. The genealogy illustrates both continuity and mortality, providing a framework for understanding population growth and settlement patterns. It situates early human activity within identifiable regions of Mesopotamia, particularly in areas associated with early urban development, such as the Tigris-Euphrates floodplain. These locations correspond with archaeological evidence for early permanent settlements dating to the 4th and 3rd millennia BC, where agriculture, animal domestication, and social hierarchies began to emerge. As populations expanded, the narrative describes an increase in human corruption, prompting a divinely instituted judgment through the flood. The flood story centers on Noah and his family, who are instructed to construct a vessel capable of preserving human and animal life. This account reflects regional flood traditions found across the Near East, including Mesopotamian texts such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which similarly describe catastrophic inundations impacting early settlements along major rivers. The flood serves as a mechanism for both destruction and continuity, eliminating widespread corruption while preserving a remnant to repopulate the earth. Following the flood, a covenant is established with Noah, delineating new terms for human existence and interaction with the environment. This covenant includes prohibitions on homicide and establishes a normative framework for human society. The narrative presents Noah's descendants as the foundation for subsequent population expansion and cultural diversification. The subsequent account of the Tower of Babel situates human activity within the context of early urban development. Humanity, concentrated in a plain in Shinar, undertakes the construction of a large communal structure. The narrative links this construction effort to the diversification of languages and the dispersion of populations. From a historical perspective, the episode reflects the development of early city-states in Mesopotamia, characterized by monumental architecture, administrative complexity, and linguistic differentiation. Archaeological and linguistic evidence indicate that by the 3rd millennium BC, multiple languages and dialects were present in the region, alongside the rise of urban centers such as Uruk, Ur, and Eridu. The narrative frames these developments as both technological achievements and catalysts for social fragmentation, aligning population movements with environmental, economic, and political pressures. Throughout these early chapters, the text establishes genealogical and geographical continuity. Key figures are associated with specific locations, including Eden, the Tigris-Euphrates region, and the Shinar Plain. These designations correlate with areas where early human settlements, agriculture, and irrigation systems are documented through archaeological surveys. The narrative emphasizes population growth, migration, and settlement dynamics, reflecting broader patterns of early civilization in the Near East. By integrating genealogical records with geographical markers, the text provides a coherent framework for understanding the emergence of early human societies. The creation account also includes the emergence of flora and fauna, with humans positioned as central actors in ecological management. Early Mesopotamian communities relied on domesticated plants and animals, consistent with the biblical portrayal of human responsibility over creation. Archaeobotanical and zooarchaeological data indicate that by the 4th millennium BC, communities in southern Mesopotamia cultivated wheat, barley, and legumes, while domesticating cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs. These practices support the biblical depiction of a structured and productive environment, wherein humans engage with the natural world through cultivation and animal husbandry. The narrative underscores the integration of human labor, environmental stewardship, and social organization in the earliest stages of civilization. The account of Cain and Abel illustrates the emergence of social norms and occupational differentiation. Cain is described as a farmer, while Abel is a herdsman. These roles correspond to the primary economic activities of early Mesopotamian communities, reflecting both agrarian and pastoral subsistence strategies. Conflict over resource allocation, social recognition, and moral conduct emerges within this framework, providing insight into the development of ethical and legal considerations in early society. The narrative establishes foundational themes of justice, responsibility, and interpersonal conduct, which informs subsequent cultural and religious practices. Noah's flood is situated within a broader pattern of environmental and societal stressors that may have affected early civilizations. Evidence of localized flooding along the Tigris and Euphrates, combined with population pressures, suggests that catastrophic events influenced settlement patterns, agricultural productivity, and social cohesion. The biblical account reflects an understanding of natural phenomena as intertwined with moral and communal imperatives, portraying disaster as both consequence and corrective measure. The post-flood covenant includes obligations that regulate human behavior, emphasizing accountability, social order, and ethical conduct within a growing population. The dispersion following the Tower of Babel represents early human migration and the spread of cultural and linguistic diversity. Historical and linguistic studies indicate that by the late 3rd millennium BC, Semitic and non-Semitic groups migrated across the Near East, establishing settlements in regions corresponding to modern-day Iraq, Syria, and southeastern Turkey. These movements facilitated the diffusion of technologies, administrative practices, and cultural norms, contributing to the emergence of complex societies. The narrative's focus on language as a unifying and divisive factor aligns with historical observations regarding the role of communication, trade, and governance in shaping early civilizations. The narrative consistently situates individuals within genealogical frameworks, linking personal histories to broader demographic and environmental processes. From Adam to Noah, each generation is associated with specific locations, lifespans, and offspring, providing continuity and structure to the unfolding history. Lifespans described in the text, while exceeding contemporary human averages, function as markers of generational continuity and social memory, emphasizing lineage and inheritance. These genealogical records also serve as chronological anchors, connecting early Mesopotamian events to subsequent developments in patriarchal and national histories. Agriculture, settlement, and urban development are central to understanding early humanity in this narrative. The text implies organized cultivation, domestication, and labor specialization, all of which correspond to archaeological findings in southern Mesopotamia. Sites such as Eridu and Uruk provide evidence for early temples, administrative structures, and irrigation systems, reflecting the organizational capacities necessary for managing increasingly dense populations. The narrative integrates these elements within a theological framework, attributing human progress, environmental interaction, and social organization to a divinely ordered system. Environmental and climatic factors are implicit in the flood and migration narratives. Seasonal flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates, soil fertility, and resource distribution likely shaped settlement locations and economic strategies. The flood narrative may represent a collective memory of regional inundations that impacted early agrarian communities, informing both religious understanding and social regulation. Similarly, population movements following Babel correspond to historical patterns of migration in response to environmental and demographic pressures. The narrative also emphasizes the moral and legal dimensions of early human society. The instructions given to Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and Noah delineate expectations regarding conduct, responsibility, and social cohesion. These legal and ethical frameworks anticipate later codifications of law and social norms within Mesopotamian and Israelite cultures, including practices related to property, family, and communal responsibility. The establishment of covenants reflects formalized agreements governing human behavior and interaction with the environment. By linking genealogies, geography, and social structures, the text provides a comprehensive account of early human development. It situates individuals and communities within identifiable regions, reflects economic and occupational specialization, and incorporates environmental, demographic, and technological considerations. The narrative traces the emergence of ethical, legal, and social norms, connecting early Mesopotamian experiences with the broader biblical storyline. The early chapters of Genesis, including the accounts of creation, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah, and the Tower of Babel, form the foundational framework for subsequent narratives. These stories establish patterns of human settlement, social organization, conflict, and migration. They emphasize continuity, lineage, and interaction with the environment, reflecting both historical and cultural realities of the ancient Near East. The narrative provides a structured and coherent introduction to human history, integrating genealogical, geographic, economic, and moral elements in a continuous account. Population growth and settlement expansion are central to understanding this period. Descendants of Noah disperse into multiple regions, establishing early communities that interact with local ecosystems and other emerging groups. These movements contribute to linguistic, cultural, and technological diversification, corresponding with evidence from archaeology and comparative historical studies. Early social institutions, such as family units, kinship networks, and occupational roles, form the basis for communal governance and cultural transmission. The narrative of the patriarchs begins with Abram, later named Abraham, a figure situated in the early 2nd millennium BC, in the region historically associated with southern Mesopotamia and the northern reaches of the Syrian steppe. Abraham is called by a divine directive to leave his native city, identified as Ur of the Chaldeans, and migrate westward toward Canaan. This migration corresponds to known movements of semi-nomadic groups within the Fertile Crescent, which spanned regions of modern Iraq, Syria, and southeastern Turkey. Abraham's journey reflects patterns of pastoral and agrarian migration characteristic of early urban peripheries, where groups sought arable land, water resources, and favorable climatic conditions for livestock grazing. Abraham establishes settlements in various locations, including Haran and the Negev region, interacting with local populations. His movements correspond to trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with the Levant and Egypt, facilitating economic exchange and cultural interaction. Archaeological surveys indicate that during this period, the Levant contained a mixture of urban centers, small towns, and nomadic encampments, consistent with the biblical depiction of Abraham as a mobile herder and landholder. The covenant between Abraham and God, central to the biblical narrative, includes promises of land, descendants, and regional significance. Historically, such covenants mirror social and legal practices in the ancient Near East, where patron-client relationships and oaths established rights to territory, inheritance, and familial continuity. Abraham's family structure is foundational to subsequent developments. His wife, Sarah, initially barren, eventually gives birth to Isaac, following divine intervention according to the narrative. Isaac represents the continuation of the lineage and the establishment of a semi-sedentary family unit in Canaan. His life occurs within the broader context of Middle Bronze Age Levantine society, characterized by fortified towns, pastoralism, and interaction with neighboring polities, including city-states in southern Canaan and the northern Jordan Valley. Isaac's activities, including land acquisition, herding, and negotiation with local inhabitants, reflect the economic strategies employed by family-based pastoralists and minor landholders during this period. Isaac's marriage to Rebekah extends the genealogical and territorial connections of the emerging Israelite lineage. The birth of Jacob and Esau introduces themes of inheritance, succession, and socioeconomic stratification. Jacob's life encompasses periods of migration, labor for wealth acquisition, and interaction with extended kin networks, illustrating the negotiation of property, marriage alliances, and tribal identity in the Levant. These narratives correspond with historical patterns of kin-based organization and land tenure in early Bronze Age and Middle Bronze Age societies. Jacob's eventual relocation to the region of Paddan Aram for an extended period involves labor arrangements that reflect contemporary economic practices, including bride service and the accumulation of livestock. Jacob acquires wealth through agreements with local families, negotiating ownership of herds and flocks, consistent with historical and anthropological evidence of pastoral economic systems in semi-arid zones. His marriages to Leah and Rachel further establish kinship networks that integrate multiple familial and social groups, creating a foundation for the later formation of tribal structures in Israel. Jacob's return to Canaan, following decades of residence in Paddan Aram, initiates a process of consolidation and population expansion. His 12 sons, representing the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel, settle in various regions within Canaan, engaging in pastoral, agricultural, and mercantile activities. Archaeological data from the 2nd millennium BC indicate that Canaan consisted of a mosaic of city-states, fortified towns, and rural settlements, with populations practicing mixed agriculture and livestock management. This environment provides the historical context for the tribal organization depicted in the biblical narrative, including patterns of seasonal migration, resource allocation, and intergroup relations. Joseph, one of Jacob's sons, experiences events that place the family within the socio-political context of Egypt. His sale into slavery and subsequent rise to prominence in the Egyptian administrative system reflect mechanisms of social mobility and integration within foreign polities. During the period corresponding to the Middle Kingdom and early Second Intermediate period of Egypt, foreign slaves and officials occasionally attained positions of influence in the bureaucracy, particularly in managing agricultural production, storage, and regional governance. Joseph's administrative role aligns with historical practices of foreign expertise employed by Egyptian authorities to oversee grain storage, trade, and famine mitigation. The migration of Jacob's family to Egypt, prompted by famine conditions, corresponds with environmental and agricultural challenges documented in the Nile Valley. Climatic fluctuations, riverine inundation cycles, and periods of crop failure affected settlement patterns and population movements. The narrative situates the Israelites in the region of Goshen, an area suitable for pastoral activities and agrarian subsistence, consistent with historical accounts of eastern delta settlements occupied by semi-nomadic and foreign groups during periods of centralized Egyptian rule. These settlements functioned as peripheral zones for integration into the broader economic and political structures of the Egyptian state. The story of Joseph and his family highlights mechanisms of integration, administration, and interregional mobility. Joseph's position within the Egyptian hierarchy enables the migration of his kin, the accumulation of resources, and the establishment of familial and social structures in a foreign territory. This reflects historical processes whereby migrant populations adapted to host societies while maintaining distinct cultural and genealogical identities. The narrative emphasizes continuity of lineage, inheritance rights, and the preservation of tribal cohesion, forming a foundation for the emerging Israelite identity. The genealogical framework of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph provides both demographic and chronological structure. Lifespans, offspring counts, and settlement locations serve as markers for population growth and migration over multiple generations. These records also establish chronological continuity for subsequent historical narratives, linking early Mesopotamian and Levantine developments to later events in Canaanite and Egyptian contexts. The emphasis on patrilineal descent reflects broader patterns of inheritance, social organization, and tribal affiliation prevalent across the ancient Near East. Cultural interactions during this period are significant. Abraham's and Jacob's movements placed them in contact with various Canaanite city-states, Amorite groups, and nomadic populations, facilitating exchanges of technology, agricultural practices, and social customs. Similarly, Joseph's integration into Egypt illustrates the permeability of cultural and administrative systems, whereby foreign expertise and labor could be assimilated into state functions. These interactions contribute to the development of hybrid cultural practices, legal customs, and economic networks, providing a realistic historical backdrop for the biblical account. The narrative incorporates settlement patterns that reflect both mobility and semi-Sedinism. Abraham and Jacob demonstrate a combination of temporary encampments and more permanent dwellings, indicative of pastoral nomadic adaptation to environmental and economic conditions. Seasonal movements align with grazing requirements, water availability, and trade opportunities. These practices are corroborated by archaeological and anthropological evidence of mixed agro-pastoralist strategies in the Levant during the early and Middle Bronze Age. Legal and covenantal frameworks remain central. The covenants with Abraham and his descendants establish principles regarding land, progeny, and social obligations. These agreements resemble contractual and patron-client arrangements known from contemporaneous Near Eastern societies, including Mesopotamian city-states, which utilized formalized oaths, contracts, and treaties to regulate property rights, labor, and familial obligations. The biblical presentation emphasizes continuity and legitimacy of these arrangements over successive generations, providing a framework for social cohesion and political identity. The narrative of famine, migration, and settlement demonstrates the influence of environmental and economic pressures on population movement. Climatic variation, including drought and localized crop failure, is a historically documented factor in settlement relocation, trade network utilization, and integration into larger political entities. The account of Joseph's management of grain supplies corresponds with known administrative strategies in Egypt, wherein surplus collection, storage, and redistribution mitigated the effects of fluctuating agricultural productivity. Population consolidation under Jacob and Joseph facilitates the emergence of early tribal structures. The 12 sons of Jacob represent both genealogical and territorial units, with family groups occupying defined regions within Canaan and, later, in the Nile Delta. These units maintain internal cohesion while interacting with neighboring groups, negotiating land use, resource allocation, and defense. The biblical narrative aligns with historical patterns of tribal organization in the Levant, including kin-based hierarchies, seasonal mobility, and integration into broader economic networks. The integration of the Israelite family into Egyptian society establishes historical continuity and demographic presence that sets the stage for subsequent events. Settlement in Goshen provides access to fertile land suitable for livestock and crop production while maintaining relative autonomy. Interaction with Egyptian authorities, administration, and local populations facilitates knowledge transfer, adaptation to foreign political systems, and maintenance of cultural identity. These processes reflect historical mechanisms by which migrant communities navigated host societies while preserving lineage and traditions. Religious and cultural continuity is emphasized through the preservation of genealogies, adherence to familial obligations, and observance of inherited practices. These elements provide historical anchors linking Mesopotamian origins with Canaanite settlement and Egyptian residence. By tracing lineage, property, and migration, the narrative establishes a continuous historical framework, integrating environmental, social, and political variables across multiple regions and generations. The narrative also reflects the role of kinship networks in social, economic, and political organization. Marriage alliances, property transfer, and labor arrangements serve as mechanisms for consolidating resources, negotiating social status, and maintaining cohesion within extended families. The biblical account consistently situated individual actions within these broader networks, highlighting both internal dynamics and interactions with external populations. The narrative of the Exodus situates the Israelite population within Egypt during a period corresponding to the Late Bronze Age, approximately the 13th or 12th century BC, in the Nile Delta region. The Israelites, descendants of the patriarchal family established in earlier narratives, are described as having increased in numbers significantly over multiple generations. This demographic growth occurred within a context of Egyptian centralization, regional administration, and agricultural production. Evidence from archaeological surveys indicates that the eastern Nile Delta contains settlements suitable for pastoralist groups integrated into Egyptian labor systems. These populations participated in agricultural production, construction projects, and local administration under pharaonic authority, reflecting known mechanisms of population management in the Late Bronze Age. Moses, a central figure in the Exodus narrative, emerges from within this context as an individual positioned to mediate between the Israelite community and Egyptian authorities. His early life, including education, household affiliation, and upbringing, situates him within the Egyptian socio-political environment, providing historical plausibility for his administrative and leadership capacities. The narrative identifies a series of escalating tensions between the Israelite population and Egyptian governance, attributed to labor obligations and social stratification. These tensions coincide with historical patterns of large-scale labor mobilization in Egypt, where corvée work and state projects required the organization of diverse populations, including foreign and semi-autonomous groups. The biblical account describes a series of divine interventions, including plagues that affect both the natural environment and human populations within Egypt. While the historical correspondence of these events remains a matter of scholarly discussion, the narrative situates them within the context of Egyptian society, including regional governance, religious structures, and economic dependencies. The plagues highlight vulnerabilities in agricultural and urban systems dependent on Nile inundation cycles, livestock management, and centralized distribution of food and resources. Contemporary studies of environmental and climatic variation in the Nile Valley support the plausibility of disruptions affecting multiple sectors simultaneously. The central event of the Exodus involves the organized departure of the Israelite population from Egypt, traditionally dated to the Late Bronze Age. This movement entails complex logistical coordination, including the mobilization of households, flocks, and herds, as well as the traversal of desert routes connecting the Nile Delta to the Sinai Peninsula. Archaeological evidence for population movements along these routes is limited but consistent with semi-nomadic patterns of the period, including seasonal transhumance, temporary encampments, and interaction with indigenous populations. The narrative describes the crossing of a significant water barrier, traditionally identified as the Red Sea or a nearby coastal lagoon system, facilitating the transition from Egyptian-controlled territory to the Sinai wilderness. Such crossings reflect both environmental constraints and strategic considerations in the movement of large groups. The Sinai Peninsula, a region of mountainous terrain, limited water sources, and variable climate, serves as the primary setting for the subsequent period of wandering. The Israelites, now organized as a distinct community, established temporary encampments and developed social, religious, and legal frameworks for communal life. The text situates Mount Sinai as a central locus of authority, where legal codes, religious practices, and covenantal obligations are formalized. The transmission of the law, including the Ten Commandments, establishes a normative framework governing human conduct, social organization, and interaction with the environment. These legal provisions reflect patterns observable in contemporary Near Eastern societies, where codes such as the laws of Hammurabi and Hittite treaties regulated property, labor, and familial obligations. The narrative emphasizes the codification of ritual and ceremonial practices, including dietary regulations, sacrificial systems, and festivals. These practices serve to reinforce group cohesion, cultural identity, and continuity across generations. Archaeological and textual studies of Bronze Age Levantine and Egyptian societies indicate comparable mechanisms for reinforcing social order, including ritualized observances, taboos, and administrative oversight. The establishment of portable religious objects, such as the Ark of the Covenant, facilitates continuity of worship and centralizes communal identity in a mobile context, reflecting strategies for maintaining cohesion during periods of migration. Population management and resource allocation during the 40 years of wandering demonstrate adaptive strategies to arid environments. The Sinai Peninsula presents limited arable land, scarce freshwater, and exposure to climatic extremes. The narrative describes reliance on natural resources, including the collection of wild flora, management of herds, and utilization of water sources from seasonal streams and oases. These adaptive practices are consistent with historical and ethnographic evidence of semi-nomadic populations operating in desert regions, where mobility, resource rotation, and temporary settlement patterns were essential for survival. Social and political structures during this period are formalized through leadership hierarchies, assembly protocols, and judicial mechanisms. Moses functions as the central authority, mediating disputes, adjudicating legal matters, and coordinating communal activities. These arrangements reflect analogous structures in other Bronze Age societies, where leadership was centralized but contingent upon compliance with codified norms and the enforcement of sanctions. The organization of subgroups, tribal divisions, and appointed officials facilitates efficient management of a population dispersed across a challenging environment. Military considerations also play a role in community organization. While the narrative emphasizes divine intervention in conflict, the historical context indicates that semi-nomadic populations frequently face threats from regional polities, raiding groups, and environmental hazards. The establishment of defensive measures, encampment strategies, and coordinated movement suggests practical strategies for risk mitigation. Seasonal and geographic knowledge of the Sinai landscape would have been critical in navigating and sustaining the population over extended periods. The narrative includes episodes of internal dissent and moral transgression, described as challenges to communal cohesion and covenantal fidelity. These instances illustrate the development of regulatory systems, enforcement mechanisms, and the codification of penalties. Anthropological studies of tribal and semi-nomadic societies reveal similar patterns, where social norms, ritual observances, and communal sanctions function to stabilize populations under environmental and social pressures. These regulatory systems integrate legal, ethical, and ceremonial components, reinforcing both social identity and group survival. The final stage of the Sinai period involves preparation for entry into Canaan, the region historically associated with the Levantine corridor extending from the Jordan River Valley to the Mediterranean coast. The narrative details surveying, reconnaissance, and coordination among tribal units to facilitate settlement in a region with established city-states, fortified towns, and indigenous populations. Archaeological evidence indicates that the late Bronze Age Levant consisted of a network of independent polities, often engaged in trade, military alliances, and cultural exchange. The biblical account situates the Israelite movement within this geopolitical context, emphasizing both strategic planning and adherence to religious obligations as factors guiding settlement. Legal codification during this period includes instructions on governance, property rights, social conduct, and religious observances. The Deuteronomic framework establishes mechanisms for maintaining social cohesion, dispute resolution, and leadership succession. Comparative studies of Near Eastern law codes demonstrate that similar provisions existed in contemporary societies, regulating family structure, economic activity, and religious practice. The transmission of these laws through oral and later written forms ensures continuity of communal identity across generations, particularly as the population transitions from a mobile desert existence to settled life in Canaan. Religious observances are closely integrated with social and legal structures. Festivals, sacrificial systems, and ritual purity regulations function to reinforce collective identity, provide continuity with ancestral practices, and delineate boundaries between community members and external groups. These practices correspond to broader patterns in Bronze Age societies, where ritualized observances played a critical role in legitimizing leadership, regulating behavior, and reinforcing social cohesion. Demographic growth during the Sinai period is a central theme. The narrative emphasizes generational continuity, population expansion, and the establishment of familial and tribal lineages. These developments are consistent with historical estimates of population increase among semi-nomadic and agrarian groups in the Levant during the Late Bronze Age. The genealogical framework maintains coherence across generations, linking individuals and tribal units to earlier patriarchal lineages established in Mesopotamia and Canaan. Resource management strategies, including distribution of water, grazing land, and agricultural output, reflect adaptive responses to environmental constraints. Settlement patterns, encampment organization, and tribal coordination ensure efficient utilization of available resources, while ceremonial and legal frameworks reinforce compliance and equitable allocation. The integration of leadership, legal codification, and ritual observance supports continuity of community identity over multiple decades in a challenging environment. The narrative situates the Exodus and Sinai period within a broader historical context, linking the Israelite experience to known regional dynamics, including Egyptian administration, Levantine settlement patterns, and interregional migration. These connections provide a coherent framework for understanding the emergence of Israelite identity as both a distinct social group and a culturally integrated population capable of interacting with established polities. By combining genealogical continuity, legal codification, religious observances, demographic growth, and environmental adaptation, the narrative constructs a comprehensive account of the formation of a national community. The Sinai period functions as a transitional stage between patriarchal migration and settlement in Canaan, establishing administrative, social, and religious structures that enable population stability, cohesion, and continuity. These structures form the foundation for subsequent historical developments, including the conquest of Canaan, the establishment of governance, and interaction with surrounding civilizations. Following the completion of the Sinai period, the narrative situates the Israelite population on the eastern periphery of Canaan, preparing to enter a region historically characterized by independent city-states, fortified towns, and established polities. The leadership transition from Moses to Joshua initiates a coordinated migration and settlement plan to establish permanent occupation in the fertile valleys and highlands of Canaan. The historical context corresponds to the Late Bronze Age collapse in the eastern Mediterranean, approximately the 13th to 12th centuries BC, a period marked by political instability, population shifts, and the decline of several regional powers, including Egyptian influence in Canaan. Joshua assumes command following established protocols for leadership succession, integrating prior Sinai-based administrative structures with military organization. Settlement in Canaan requires both strategic coordination and negotiation with indigenous populations, which include Amorite, Canaanite, Hittite, and other Levantine groups. Archaeological surveys indicate that Late Bronze Age Canaan was organized into a network of walled cities interspersed with rural villages, often situated on elevated terrain to optimize defense and access to arable land. Urban centers such as Hazor, Jericho, and Shechem demonstrate substantial fortifications, administrative facilities, and evidence of trade networks connecting coastal and inland settlements. The narrative describes a series of campaigns under Joshua, emphasizing both military engagement and territorial allocation. These campaigns correspond to patterns of semi-nomadic settlement expansion observed in other regions during periods of political fragmentation, where incoming groups established dominance through negotiation, alliance, and selective engagement. Archaeological evidence for destruction layers in some sites, such as Hazor, is consistent with episodes of urban conflict during the Late Bronze Age, though the scale and chronology remain subjects of scholarly discussion. These events illustrate the process of settlement consolidation, integration of incoming populations, and adaptation to pre-existing political structures. Following the initial conquest, the Israelite population adopts a decentralized form of governance characterized by tribal organization and regional autonomy. This period, known as the Era of the Judges, extends over several centuries and involves cyclical patterns of settlement stability, conflict, and renewal. Leadership during this era is typically localized, with figures emerging as military, judicial, or spiritual authorities in response to specific challenges. Historical parallels exist in other contemporary societies, where decentralized governance allowed for flexibility in responding to external threats, internal disputes, and environmental pressures. The judges functioned both as adjudicators and military coordinators, overseeing communal compliance with legal and ritual obligations. Their authority was situational, often linked to charismatic or demonstrated leadership during periods of crisis. The narrative describes cycles of territorial encroachment, social fragmentation, and re-establishment of order, reflecting both demographic expansion and the integration of newly settled populations. These patterns align with evidence of fluctuating settlement densities, fortification construction, and intergroup conflict in Late Bronze Age and Early Iron Age Canaan. Economic structures during this period include mixed agrarian and pastoral systems, utilizing irrigated valleys, terraced highlands, and seasonal grazing areas. Archaeobotanical and zooarchaeological data indicate the cultivation of wheat, barley, and legumes, alongside domesticated herds of cattle, sheep, and goats. These economic activities provide the material foundation for population growth, social differentiation, and intertribal interactions. Trade networks connect Israelite settlements with neighboring city-states and coastal ports, facilitating the exchange of goods, technology, and cultural practices. Religious and cultural organization develops concurrently with tribal governance. The narrative emphasizes the centrality of covenantal obligations, ritual observance, and maintenance of sacred sites. Early worship structures, including high places and communal gathering locations, serve as loci for religious practice and social cohesion. These practices reflect broader Near Eastern patterns, where religious observance reinforced communal identity, regulated behavior, and legitimized leadership. The integration of ritual, legal, and military functions under the judges establishes a framework for subsequent institutional development. Social structure during this period is organized around kinship and tribal affiliation. The 12 tribes of Israel maintain distinct territories and leadership hierarchies, while cooperating in matters of defense, legal enforcement, and communal religious observance. Conflict resolution occurs both internally, through arbitration by elders and judges, and externally, through coordination of military action against competing polities. These mechanisms reflect strategies employed by small-scale societies in the late Bronze Age Levant, balancing autonomy with collective action in response to environmental, demographic, and political pressures. The narrative describes cycles of expansion, conflict, and consolidation, reflecting historical processes of settlement stabilization in a region marked by heterogeneous populations. Archaeological evidence indicates fluctuations in settlement patterns, including temporary abandonment of sites, construction of fortifications, and integration of new population groups. These dynamics are consistent with the biblical portrayal of repeated military engagement, social reorganization, and religious centralization under the oversight of the judges. The transition from tribal governance to monarchy occurs as a response to increasing internal and external pressures. Tribal leaders, recognizing the need for centralized coordination, request the establishment of a monarchy. The anointment of Saul as the first king represents the integration of existing tribal structures into a unified political entity. Historical parallels include similar centralizing efforts in contemporary Levantine and Near Eastern societies, where city-states and tribal confederations consolidated authority under a single ruler to coordinate defense, economic production, and administrative control. Saul's reign involves military campaigns against neighboring groups, consolidation of territory, and establishment of central administrative mechanisms. While archaeological evidence for Saul's specific reign is limited, the broader context of the early Iron Age supports the plausibility of emerging monarchic structures, fortification construction, and increased interregional interaction. Saul's role as both political and military leader reflects patterns observed in other early monarchies, where authority combined governance, judicial oversight, and defense coordination. Following Saul, David ascends to the throne, unifying the Israelite tribes and extending control over key regions of Canaan, including the Central Highlands, Southern Territories, and portions of the coastal plain. David establishes Jerusalem as a political and religious center, integrating the city into existing settlement networks. Archaeological evidence indicates that Jerusalem was a fortified site during the 10th century BC, with structures suitable for administrative, religious, and military functions. David's consolidation includes both military campaigns and strategic alliances with neighboring polities, reflecting historical processes of state formation and territorial integration in the early Iron Age Levant. David's administration incorporates bureaucratic structures, military organization, and social regulation. Tribal leaders and local officials are integrated into a hierarchical governance system, facilitating taxation, conscription, and coordination of public works. Religious centralization is emphasized through control of key cultic sites and regulation of ritual practice, establishing a unified framework for worship and social cohesion. These developments align with regional trends in state formation, where central authority consolidated resources, standardized legal codes, and reinforced elite control over populations. Solomon, David's successor, extends political, economic, and religious consolidation, most prominently through the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem. The temple serves as a religious, administrative, and cultural focal point, centralizing sacrificial practice, ritual observance, and collection of tithes. Historical evidence from the 10th century BC indicates that monumental construction projects were feasible within regional economic systems, utilizing labor, imported materials, and specialized craftsmanship. Solomon's reign demonstrates both administrative sophistication and the capacity to mobilize resources across multiple territories, consistent with contemporary Near Eastern monarchies. Trade and diplomatic activity during Solomon's reign integrated the Israelite state into broader regional networks. Alliances with neighboring kingdoms, management of caravan routes, and participation in maritime trade connect Israel with Egypt, Phoenicia, and Mesopotamia. Archaeological data corroborate the presence of imported luxury goods, metallurgical technology, and architectural influence, reflecting economic and cultural integration within the Eastern Mediterranean. These activities facilitate urban development, economic specialization, and socio-political stability within the Israelite polity. Population distribution during the United Monarchy reflects both urban and rural settlement. Centralized administrative centers, fortified cities, and regional hubs provide coordination and governance, while rural villages support agricultural production, livestock management, and resource supply. These settlement patterns align with historical and archaeological evidence for early Iron Age Canaan, demonstrating integration of central authority with local economic and social systems. Religious practice under the United Monarchy emphasizes centralized worship, ritual standardization, and maintenance of covenantal obligations. The construction of the temple, establishment of priestly hierarchies, and codification of ritual observance provide mechanisms for social cohesion, elite legitimacy, and cultural continuity. Comparative analysis with contemporary Levantine polities demonstrates similar use of monumental religious structures and institutionalized priesthoods to reinforce central authority and collective identity. Military organization during this period incorporates both standing forces and levies drawn from tribal populations. Strategic fortifications, city defense planning, and regional coordination reflect the necessity of maintaining territorial integrity against neighboring polities, raiding groups, and environmental pressures. Archaeological evidence, including city walls, gates, and weaponry, supports the plausibility of organized military capacity during the early Iron Age in Canaan. Legal, social, and economic systems during the United Monarchy demonstrate integration of tribal traditions with centralized governance. Property rights, taxation, labor obligations, and dispute resolution mechanisms are codified to support population management, economic productivity, and social stability. These systems reflect patterns observable in other early monarchies of the Near East, where governance required balancing local autonomy with centralized authority to maintain cohesion and control. By combining military consolidation, administrative centralization, religious unification, economic integration, and social regulation, the period of the Conquest, Judges, and United Monarchy establishes a coherent framework for the emerging Israelite state. Settlement patterns, tribal integration, and institutional development provide continuity from prior Sinai-based governance structures while adapting to the geopolitical and environmental conditions of Canaan. These developments lay the foundation for subsequent historical events, including the division of the kingdom, prophetic activity, and interactions with neighboring empires. Following the death of Solomon in the late 10th century BC, the political cohesion of the Israelite state underwent a significant transformation. Internal discontent, arising from heavy taxation, labor obligations, and regional disparities, contributed to a division of the kingdom into northern and southern polities. The northern kingdom, historically referred to as Israel, consisted of approximately 10 tribal territories, encompassing regions of the Jezreel Valley, Galilee, Samaria, and parts of the coastal plain. The southern kingdom, known as Judah, incorporated the territories of Benjamin and Judah, centered on Jerusalem. This political bifurcation reflects both structural pressures within centralized monarchies and broader patterns of state fragmentation observed across the late Iron Age Levant. The northern kingdom of Israel established Samaria as its political capital in the 9th century BC under the rule of Omri. Samaria's strategic location allowed for oversight of the central hill country, access to trade routes, and control over agricultural and pastoral resources. Archaeological evidence confirms substantial fortifications, administrative buildings, and material culture consistent with Iron Age urban centers. Israel's political structure relied on royal authority augmented by regional tribal elites and administrative functionaries, balancing centralized governance with local autonomy. The kingdom engaged in both defensive and expansionary military campaigns, interacting with neighboring Aramean, Phoenician, and Philistine polities, as well as negotiating tributary arrangements with larger regional powers, including Egypt and Mesopotamia. Religious practice in the northern kingdom exhibited syncretism influenced by indigenous Canaanite traditions, Phoenician cultic practices, and official royal institutions. Kings established multiple cultic centers, including Bethel and Dan, where ritual observances, sacrificial practices, and festivals were conducted. Archaeological findings, such as altars, inscriptions, and cultic figurines, support the presence of localized worship patterns integrated with political authority. Prophetic activity in Israel emerged as a response to both political instability and perceived deviations from covenantal law. Figures such as Elijah and Elisha operated within a context of monarchical consolidation and regional conflict, advocating for social justice, fidelity to centralized worship, and ethical conduct. These prophetic movements reflect broader patterns in the ancient Near East, where religious leaders sought to influence governance, social norms, and collective identity. Israel experienced periodic conflict and territorial pressure from neighboring states, particularly the Aramean Kingdom of Damascus and regional coalitions among Levantine city-states. These interactions included both military engagement and diplomatic negotiation, as evidenced by Assyrian annals and regional inscriptions documenting campaigns, tribute collection, and vassalage. Internal instability, including dynastic succession disputes, civil unrest, and localized revolts, contributed to the kingdom's vulnerability. These dynamics culminated in the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom in 722 BC, destroying Samaria, the deportation of significant portions of the population, and integrating the region into the Assyrian imperial system. The loss of political autonomy and population dispersal had lasting demographic, cultural, and religious implications for the Israelite communities in the north. The southern kingdom of Judah retained its capital at Jerusalem and maintained a degree of political continuity, despite regional pressures. Judah's geography, including mountainous terrain and defensible positions, contributed to the relative stability of its monarchy. Kings such as Hezekiah and Josiah implemented administrative reforms, fortification projects, and centralized religious observance, seeking to consolidate authority and reinforce social cohesion. Archaeological evidence from Jerusalem and surrounding sites, including fortifications, administrative structures, and religious installations, supports the existence of an organized polity capable of sustained governance over multiple centuries. Judah's political strategy involved balancing tribute obligations to imperial powers, including Assyria and Egypt, with internal consolidation of resources and religious authority. Religious reform in Judah, particularly under kings such as Hezekiah and Josiah, emphasized centralization of worship in Jerusalem and adherence to covenantal law. Temple renovations, priestly codification, and suppression of localized high places reflect administrative and theological strategies designed to reinforce political legitimacy and social cohesion. These measures parallel contemporaneous efforts in neighboring states to standardize ritual practice, centralize cultic authority, and integrate religious observance with political governance. The narrative of Judah highlights the interplay between dynastic authority, religious centralization, and societal stability in a small state context within the Levantine Iron Age. Prophetic activity in Judah paralleled developments in the northern kingdom but exhibited distinctive characteristics due to geographic, political, and social conditions. Prophets such as Isaiah, Micah, and Jeremiah addressed issues of social justice, ethical conduct, and covenantal fidelity, often in response to external threats, including Assyrian and later Babylonian expansion. These figures functioned as both moral critics and advisors, utilizing rhetoric, symbolic acts, and written discourse to influence public behavior, governance, and religious observance. The integration of prophetic literature into the historical record reflects the dual role of these individuals as social commentators and mediators of religious tradition. The Assyrian conquest of Israel had broader regional implications, influencing Judah's strategic calculations and demographic patterns. Assyrian campaigns, documented in annals and reliefs, demonstrate the use of military, administrative, and population relocation strategies to consolidate imperial control. The deportation and resettlement of populations contributed to cultural diffusion, the introduction of new administrative practices, and shifts in local economic and social organization. Judah, while initially a vassal state, navigated these pressures through a combination of tribute, diplomacy, and internal reform, illustrating adaptive strategies employed by smaller polities under imperial hegemony. Fall of Israel and subsequent Assyrian domination led to the migration of surviving populations, the integration of foreign settlers, and the emergence of cultural hybridity in the northern territories. These processes affected linguistic patterns, religious practice, and social organization, creating a context in which prophetic voices addressed issues of identity preservation, covenantal obligation, and ethical responsibility. The historical experience of the Northern Kingdom demonstrates the vulnerability of small states to imperial expansion and the enduring impact of conquest on population structure and cultural continuity. Judah's eventual exposure to Babylonian expansion introduced additional challenges. The Babylonian campaigns, culminating in the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC, destroyed the First Temple, the deportation of the elite and skilled classes, and the imposition of administrative control over the remaining populations. Archaeological evidence confirms destruction layers corresponding to this period, including collapsed fortifications, burned administrative buildings, and disrupted urban stratigraphy. These events underscore the intersection of military technology, imperial strategy, and population management in the context of Iron Age Levantine polities. The exile to Babylon facilitated the development of theological reflection, religious codification, and communal restructuring. Figures such as Ezekiel operated within the diaspora, addressing issues of identity, ritual observance, and covenantal fidelity under conditions of displacement. The integration of prophetic discourse with historical events illustrates the use of narrative, ritual, and written codification to maintain cultural cohesion, provide ethical guidance, and interpret political and social crises within a theological framework. Socioeconomic structures in both kingdoms included agrarian production, pastoral management, and localized craft and trade networks. Settlement patterns indicate a combination of fortified urban centers, regional villages, and rural estates, supporting diversified economic activity and population distribution. Archaeological data, including storage facilities, domestic installations, and material culture, corroborate textual references to agricultural surpluses, trade commodities, and administrative coordination. These economic strategies enabled both northern and southern kingdoms to maintain stability and support military and administrative obligations, while also shaping patterns of social stratification and elite authority. Diplomatic relations played a critical role in the survival and autonomy of Judah, particularly in interactions with regional powers such as Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon. Treaty practices, tribute arrangements, and alliances reflect strategies employed by small states to navigate imperial pressures while maintaining internal cohesion. These interactions influenced political decision-making, resource allocation, and military preparedness, situating Judah within the broader geopolitical landscape of the Iron Age Near East. Cultural continuity in both kingdoms was reinforced through the maintenance of genealogical records, ritual practice, and the codification of historical and legal texts. These mechanisms provided continuity across generations, preserved collective memory, and reinforced social identity in the face of political fragmentation and external threat. Prophetic literature, administrative records, and ritual observances collectively functioned to stabilize populations, codify norms, and transmit ethical and legal frameworks across successive generations. The narrative of the divided kingdom also demonstrates the interplay between central authority and local autonomy. Regional, tribal, and urban elites exercised considerable influence, mediating between the monarchy and local populations. This distribution of authority reflects adaptive governance strategies, balancing central control with localized administration to maintain compliance, collect tribute, and organize defense. These patterns are corroborated by comparative studies of contemporary Levantine polities and Iron Age administrative systems. The ultimate demise of the Northern Kingdom and the vulnerability of the Southern Kingdom underscore the importance of geographic, demographic, and strategic factors in state resilience. Israel's location in the central and northern hill country exposed it to repeated military incursions and limited defensive options, while Judah's mountainous terrain and fortified urban centers allowed greater temporal stability. These factors, combined with political leadership, economic organization, and diplomatic strategy, determined the relative endurance of each polity within the broader context of Near Eastern imperial dynamics. Religious and cultural adaptation in response to conquest and exile illustrates the resilience of identity among the Israelite populations. In both the North and South, the preservation of genealogical memory, ritual observance, and textual codification provided mechanisms for maintaining communal coherence despite political disruption. The experiences of conquest, deportation, and imperial integration fostered theological reflection, prophetic critique, and the development of interpretive frameworks that shaped subsequent religious, social, and political thought within the Israelite tradition. The Babylonian conquest of Judah in 586 BC marked a transformative period in Israelite history, producing profound political, social, and religious consequences. The fall of Jerusalem, the destruction of the First Temple, and the deportation of the elite and skilled classes to Babylon initiated the period commonly referred to as the Babylonian exile. Babylonian imperial strategy involved population displacement, the imposition of administrative oversight, and the incorporation of conquered territories into a structured provincial system. Deportations served multiple purposes, neutralizing potential resistance, integrating skilled labor into the imperial economy, and facilitating cultural exchange within the empire. Historical records, including Babylonian chronicles and administrative texts, confirm the practice of relocating populations and establishing satellite communities across Mesopotamia, providing context for the Israelite experience in exile. Exiled Judean populations were settled primarily in the regions surrounding Babylon, including Nippur, Uar, and along the Euphrates corridor. These locations were integrated into imperial agricultural, artisanal, and administrative systems. Archaeological evidence, including residential structures, storage facilities, and artifacts, reflects adaptation to urban and semi-urban Mesopotamian environments. The exiles maintained distinct cultural and religious identities through preservation of genealogical memory, adherence to dietary and ritual laws, and communal organization. These mechanisms ensured the continuity of Israelite identity while allowing integration into the larger imperial context. Religious and theological development during the exile intensified due to displacement and loss of the temple, the central locus of ritual practice. The prophetic literature produced or codified in this period reflects reflection on divine sovereignty, covenantal fidelity, and communal responsibility. Figures such as Ezekiel addressed both exiled populations and those remaining in Judah, emphasizing the maintenance of ritual, ethical conduct, and communal cohesion in the absence of national sovereignty. Theologically, the exile catalyzed reflection on the relationship between divine promise and historical events, prompting reinterpretation of covenantal obligations in a context of political subjugation. Administrative and social organization among the exiles included leadership structures composed of elders, priestly figures, and community heads. These leaders facilitated communication with Babylonian authorities, coordinated resource distribution, and organized religious observances. Temple rituals, sacrificial systems, and liturgical practice were adapted to exile conditions, emphasizing portability, symbolic continuity, and community cohesion. The codification of legal texts, genealogies, and prophetic writings during this period contributed to the preservation of historical memory and the standardization of ritual and ethical norms across dispersed populations. The figure of Daniel illustrates the integration of Judean exiles into the administrative and intellectual life of the Babylonian and subsequent Persian empires. Daniel and contemporaries occupied positions within the imperial bureaucracy, engaging in administrative, diplomatic, and scholarly functions. Babylonian and Persian records corroborate the existence of similar institutions that employed foreign elites for governance, accounting, and advisory roles. These positions provided avenues for influence, adaptation, and cultural exchange, while maintaining fidelity to communal identity and religious practice. The Persian conquest of Babylon by Cyrus the Great in 539 BC initiated a new phase in Judean history. Cyrus's administrative strategy, documented in inscriptions such as the Cyrus Cylinder, emphasized the restoration of local religious institutions, repatriation of displaced populations, and support for temple rebuilding. For Judeans, this policy facilitated the return to Jerusalem, the reconstruction of civic and religious structures, and the re-establishment of governance under Persian provincial administration. The decree attributed to Cyrus, whether understood as a formal royal edict or as a policy applied locally, enabled the organization of Ritterni groups under designated leadership, often organized by familial, tribal, and priestly affiliation. The return from exile occurred in waves, beginning with an initial group under the leadership of Zerubbabel around 538 to 520 BC. Zerubbabel, a descendant of the Davidic line, oversaw the rebuilding of the Second Temple and the re-establishment of foundational religious structures. Archaeological evidence, including structural remains and inscriptions, indicates reconstruction activity in Jerusalem and the surrounding province of Yehud. Returnees engaged in re-establishing agricultural productivity, reconstructing urban facilities, and reinstituting administrative and ritual practices. Coordination with Persian provincial authorities ensured political stability and integration within the imperial system, while maintaining distinct religious and social identity. Subsequent return movements included leaders such as Ezra and Nehemiah in the late 5th century BC. Ezra, a scribe and priest, codified religious and legal texts, emphasizing adherence to Torah law, social reform, and regulation of intermarriage. Nehemiah, serving as governor under Persian authority, oversaw the reconstruction of Jerusalem's walls, fortifications, and civic administration. These initiatives integrated practical governance, legal codification, and community organization, addressing both physical and social reconstruction. Administrative measures included registration of populations, resource allocation, and implementation of security measures to ensure urban resilience in a politically complex and culturally diverse region. The narrative of Esther, set within the Persian imperial context, reflects both the integration of Judean populations within the administrative and social framework of the empire and the negotiation of identity within a non-Judean environment. Esther's historical plausibility is supported by records of Persian court organization, provincial administration, and minority population management. The account demonstrates mechanisms of social influence, legal advocacy, and cultural negotiation employed by minority populations under imperial governance. Economic reconstruction during the post-exilic period included restoration of agricultural production, management of land tenure, and revival of trade networks connecting Jerusalem with the broader Levant and Mesopotamia. Archaeological and textual evidence indicate the implementation of irrigation systems, the re-establishment of village and urban settlements, and the coordination of tax and tribute obligations under Persian authority. These measures facilitated population resettlement, economic stability, and integration within the provincial framework, while supporting the social and ritual obligations central to communal cohesion. Religious and social reform during the post-exilic period emphasized centralization of worship, codification of legal and ritual texts, and reinforcement of priestly authority. Temple reconstruction under Zerubbabel and ritual regulation under Ezra established continuity with pre-exilic practice while adapting to post-exilic conditions. Public readings of Torah law, reinstitution of festivals, and reinforcement of dietary and purity laws served as mechanisms for community formation, identity preservation, and intergenerational continuity. Prophetic voices during this period, including Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, address themes of restoration, ethical conduct, and covenantal fidelity. These texts reflect engagement with both historical memory and contemporary social circumstances, integrating theological reflection with practical guidance for communal reorganization. Prophetic literature functions as both an interpretive framework and a normative guide, shaping communal expectations, social cohesion, and ritual observance during a period of reconstruction and cultural negotiation. The post-exilic community developed structures to sustain religious, legal, and social cohesion in the absence of political sovereignty. Synagogue development, public instruction, and local councils provided mechanisms for religious observance, education, and adjudication. These institutions facilitated community governance, transmission of knowledge, and regulation of social and ethical conduct, reinforcing collective identity while accommodating the broader political context of Persian administration. Integration within the Persian imperial framework required negotiation between local authority and imperial oversight. Persian policy included the appointment of governors, taxation systems, and legal oversight, creating a balance between autonomy and local governance in compliance with imperial directives. Ridderni leaders operated within this system to implement urban planning, resource management, and religious administration, ensuring both compliance with imperial expectations and preservation of distinct cultural and religious identity. Social stratification during the post-exilic period reflected both inherited hierarchies from pre-exilic structures and adaptations to exile and return. Priesthood, genealogical status, and economic capacity influenced leadership roles, while new administrative requirements under Persian governance created opportunities for emerging elites. Population records, genealogical documentation, and civic registration facilitated continuity, legal recognition, and coordination across multiple returning groups. Cultural preservation strategies included textual codification, ritual observance, and genealogical documentation. Compilation of historical records, legal codes, and prophetic literature reinforced continuity of identity, facilitated intergenerational transmission of tradition, and legitimized administrative and religious authority. These strategies ensured cohesion within a dispersed and politically dependent population, while maintaining alignment with broader Near Eastern patterns of documentation, ritualization, and administrative structuring. Population management incorporated urban planning, agricultural coordination, and resource distribution. Reconstruction of Jerusalem's urban infrastructure, including walls, gates, and civic buildings, supported defense, trade, and administration. Agricultural settlements in surrounding regions provided subsistence, economic surplus, and integration with imperial trade networks. These strategies reflect both practical adaptation to environmental conditions and adherence to legal and ritual frameworks guiding communal organization. Interactions with surrounding populations, including non-Judean residents of the province, involved negotiation, cultural exchange, and occasional conflict. Legal and administrative frameworks, as codified by Ezra and implemented under Nehemiah, addressed intermarriage, resource allocation, and civic responsibilities. These measures balanced integration within the broader imperial structure with the preservation of distinct religious, social, and cultural identities. The period between the completion of the Hebrew Bible and the emergence of the New Testament, approximately 400 to 5 BC, represents a complex era of political, social, and religious transformation for the Jewish people, commonly referred to as the intertestamental period. This era is defined by the absence of prophetic writing in the biblical corpus and the domination of Judean territory by successive empires, including the Persian, Hellenistic, and Roman authorities. The geopolitical context of this period influenced population movement, cultural exchange, and the development of religious institutions that shaped Jewish identity, social organization, and messianic expectations in the centuries preceding the life of Jesus. Following the Persian Empire's administration of Yehud province in the 5th century BC, Judea experienced relative autonomy under local governors, religious authorities, and Persian oversight. Governance included taxation, maintenance of infrastructure, and legal adjudication, with local elites and priestly families administering daily affairs. Historical sources, including Persian administrative records and archaeological evidence from Jerusalem and surrounding settlements, indicate systematic population registration, land allocation, and tribute collection. This administrative continuity provided a stable environment for the consolidation of post-exilic religious practices, including temple worship, priestly oversight, and adherence to Torah law codified under Ezra and Nehemiah. Persian control over Judea ended in the late 4th century BC with the conquest of the Near East by Alexander the Great, c. 336 to 323 BC. The Hellenistic period that followed introduced profound cultural, political, and economic changes. Alexander's campaigns facilitated the spread of the Greek language, political institutions, and urban planning across the eastern Mediterranean, including Judea. The establishment of Hellenistic cities, administrative centers, and trade networks connected the region to larger Mediterranean economic systems. enhancing interaction with neighboring territories and cultural exchange between Greek and local populations. Archaeological remains, including Greek-style urban layouts, coins, and inscriptions, reflect the diffusion of Hellenistic influence in Judea, Galilee, and surrounding provinces. Following Alexander's death in 323 BC, his empire fragmented into multiple Hellenistic kingdoms, most notably the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt and the Seleucid dynasty in Syria. Control of Judea oscillated between these powers, resulting in alternating periods of administrative, economic, and military influence. The Ptolemaic period, roughly 320 to 200 BC, saw the integration of Judea into Egyptian trade networks, the introduction of Hellenistic administrative practices, and exposure to Greek education, language, and culture. This period also encouraged interaction between Jewish and Hellenistic communities, fostering bilingualism and the adoption of Greek literary and legal practices in urban centers such as Jerusalem, Joppa, and coastal settlements. Under Seleucid rule beginning circa 200 BC, Judea faced increasing centralization and attempts to standardize administration, law, and religious practice across the empire. The Seleucid policies included taxation, garrisoning of troops, and imposition of imperial cults, which occasionally conflicted with established Jewish religious norms. The tension between imperial authority and local religious tradition contributed to socio-political unrest, culminating in resistance movements such as the Maccabean Revolt, 167 to 160 BC. This revolt, led by the Hasmonean family, restored Jewish autonomy temporarily and resulted in the rededication of the Temple in Jerusalem, an event commemorated in the festival of Hanukkah. Archaeological evidence, including coins, fortifications, and inscriptions, supports the presence of autonomous governance and military organization during this period. The Maccabean period, c. 160 to 63 BC, represents the first instance of Jewish self-rule following the post-exilic Persian administration. Governance combined theocratic and dynastic elements, with high priests exercising religious authority alongside the Hasmonean family, which assumed political leadership. This period involved territorial expansion, consolidation of Judea, and subjugation or incorporation of neighboring regions, including Idumea and Samaria. Administrative and economic records indicate taxation systems, fortification construction, and urban development, reflecting structured governance and resource management. Military campaigns were organized to defend against external threats from Seleucid forces, Hellenistic mercenaries, and local opposition, reinforcing centralized authority and territorial control. Religious institutions and practices underwent significant evolution during the intertestamental period. The post-exilic focus on temple worship and Torah law persisted, while synagogues and localized study centers became increasingly important for community cohesion, legal instruction, and ritual observance. Development of oral law, codification of traditions, and interpretation of texts by scribes and religious teachers contributed to the consolidation of legal and ethical frameworks. This period also witnessed the rise of sectarian groups, each representing distinct approaches to law, ritual, and theological interpretation. These included the Pharisees, who emphasized oral law ritual purity and adaptability, the Sadducees associated with the priestly elite and temple administration, the Essenes who practiced communal asceticism and scriptural interpretation, and other smaller groups focused on localized practices or messianic expectations. Messianic anticipation intensified during this period, reflecting a combination of historical experience, prophetic interpretation, and socio-political conditions. Exile, foreign domination, and socio-political unrest contributed to the expectation of a divinely appointed deliverer who would restore Israelite sovereignty, enforce covenantal law, and re-establish social and religious order. Various interpretations of messianic roles emerged, ranging from a priestly figure responsible for religious reform, a prophetic leader advocating ethical restoration, to a Davidic monarch capable of political and military leadership. Literature associated with this period, including apocryphal and pseudepigraphal texts, illustrates the diversity of thought regarding eschatology, divine intervention, and the timing of deliverance. The translation of Hebrew scriptures into Greek, the Septuagint, occurring primarily during the 3rd to 2nd centuries BC in Alexandria, provided both a medium for broader Hellenistic dissemination of Jewish texts and a framework for interpretation in Greek-speaking communities. This translation reflects both linguistic adaptation and theological interpretation, facilitating interaction with non-Jewish populations while maintaining core legal and ethical principles. The widespread distribution of translated texts contributed to the diffusion of Jewish thought, preservation of scriptural traditions, and accessibility for diaspora populations within the Hellenistic world. Economic life during the intertestamental period included agriculture, trade, urban commerce, and participation in regional and imperial economic systems. Judean cities and villages engaged in the production of grain, olives, and wine, alongside pastoral activities involving sheep, goats, and cattle. Trade networks extended along coastal ports, connecting to Egypt, Phoenicia, Syria, and Mesopotamia, facilitating the exchange of goods, technology, and cultural practices. Archaeological evidence demonstrates storage facilities, coinage, and imported artifacts consistent with integration into broader Mediterranean economic systems. Urban planning, fortification construction, and infrastructure improvements in cities such as Jerusalem, Jaffa, and Sepphoris illustrate organized municipal administration and resource allocation. Political developments during this period reflect both external pressures and internal factionalism. The competing influences of Ptolemaic and Seleucid administration required local leaders to navigate diplomacy, taxation, and military obligations. The Hasmonean dynasty exemplifies the emergence of local authority combining religious legitimacy with political control. Dynastic leadership, in conjunction with priestly oversight, enabled management of urban centers, rural territories, and defense infrastructure. Interaction with surrounding Hellenistic polities required negotiation, alliance formation, and, at times, military engagement to maintain autonomy and territorial integrity. Social stratification evolved as a consequence of economic specialization, religious authority, and political consolidation. Elite families controlled land, temple resources, and administrative positions, while artisan, merchant, and agrarian populations occupied intermediate social tiers. Sectarian movements and communal associations provided alternative structures of influence, education, and social cohesion, allowing groups outside the elite to exert moral and cultural authority within local communities. Population registration, genealogical documentation, and legal codification facilitated both civic administration and preservation of social order. The cultural landscape of Judea and the surrounding regions during the intertestamental period was shaped by interaction with Greek, Persian, and Near Eastern traditions. Architecture, artistic expression, language, and legal practice incorporated elements of Hellenistic influence while retaining a distinctly Jewish identity. Bilingual inscriptions, coinage, and material culture evidenced the adaptation of Judean communities to the broader cultural milieu, demonstrating selective assimilation and preservation of key religious, legal, and ethical norms. Education and textual study became central to communal cohesion and the transmission of knowledge. Scribes, teachers, and religious leaders provided instruction in Torah law, historical tradition, and ritual observance. Oral transmission complemented written codification, ensuring intergenerational continuity of knowledge and practice. Schools and study centers, often associated with synagogues or urban administrative centers, functioned as sites for civic engagement, ethical formation, and communal regulation, providing mechanisms for sustaining religious and social identity across diverse populations. The political and cultural conditions of the late intertestamental period, approximately the 1st century BC to 5 BC, set the stage for Roman involvement in Judea. Roman expansion, beginning with client-king arrangements and culminating in direct provincial administration, introduced new administrative structures, taxation systems, and political oversight. Local governance continued to integrate priestly authority, dynastic leadership, and Roman oversight, reflecting patterns of imperial-provincial interaction common in other Eastern Mediterranean territories. This period also witnessed heightened messianic expectation, rooted in centuries of political subjugation, prophetic literature, and Hellenistic influence, shaping the intellectual and religious environment into which the figure of Jesus would emerge. The historical context of 1st century Judea, Galilee, and surrounding regions was defined by Roman imperial administration, local client kings, and a complex network of religious and social institutions. Judea was under the governance of Roman-appointed officials, including prefects and procurators, with Herod Antipas ruling Galilee and Perea as a tetrarch under Roman oversight. Roman occupation involved taxation, law enforcement, and military presence, influencing economic, political, and social life. Local Jewish authorities, including the high priest and the Sanhedrin, exercised religious and judicial control within the temple precincts, administering ritual, legal, and civil matters according to Torah law. Urban centers, villages, and trade routes in Galilee, Judea, Samaria, and neighboring regions were integrated into broader imperial networks, enabling the movement of people, goods, and ideas. Jesus of Nazareth was born in the early 1st century AD, during the reign of Herod the Great in Judea, a period marked by Roman consolidation of provincial authority, regional dynastic governance, and economic stratification. Nazareth, a small village in the lower Galilean highlands, was part of a network of rural settlements engaged in agriculture, viticulture, and pastoral activities. Archaeological evidence indicates modest stone and mud brick dwellings, communal water systems, and terraces for cultivation, reflecting a small-scale agrarian economy and subsistence practices. Socially, rural populations were organized around kinship, village councils, and localized religious observance, with seasonal participation in temple festivals and adherence to Jewish legal traditions. The public activity of Jesus commenced in Galilee during his late 20s or early 30s. His ministry emphasized teaching, ethical instruction, ritual observance, and engagement with local communities. Jesus utilized parables, aphorisms, and illustrative narratives as pedagogical methods, addressing both urban and rural audiences. The content of these teachings engage with existing Jewish law, prophetic tradition, and social norms, focusing on themes of ethical conduct, social responsibility, ritual purity, and covenantal fidelity. Historical analysis situates Jesus' teachings within the broader context of Second Temple Judaism, including Pharisaic, Sadducean, and Essene interpretive frameworks, highlighting both continuity with and innovation upon contemporary religious discourse. Jesus' itinerant ministry involved extensive travel throughout Galilee, Perea, and Judea. He operated within urban centers such as Capernaum, Bethsaida, and Jerusalem, as well as rural villages and regions along trade routes and waterways. Movement facilitated engagement with diverse populations, including agrarian laborers, fishermen, merchants, religious leaders, and diaspora Jews. Mobility allowed the dissemination of teachings, the establishment of followership networks, and the engagement with localized social and political structures, including interactions with temple authorities, local councils, and Roman officials. A significant aspect of Jesus' ministry involved the performance of actions interpreted as healing, exorcism, and restoration of ritual or social standing. These actions included care for the sick, support for marginalized populations, and facilitation of ritual participation, consistent with contemporaneous Jewish practices of compassion, ritual purity, and social inclusion. Accounts of such activity reflect patterns of social engagement, public reputation, and communal expectation within first-century Jewish society. These actions contributed to the formation of a distinct group of followers and the establishment of social networks extending across multiple localities. Interactions with religious authorities constituted a critical dimension of Jesus' ministry. Tensions arose over the interpretation of Torah law, observance of ritual practices, and authority over the temple and local synagogues. Engagements with Pharisees, Sadducees, and temple officials involved legal discourse, debate over ritual interpretation, and negotiation of religious authority. Historical context situates these interactions within broader patterns of Jewish legal debate, sectarian differentiation, and contested claims to religious legitimacy in the late Second Temple period. Jesus' public activity culminated in Jerusalem during the Passover festival, a period of heightened religious and political attention due to large population gatherings and Roman security concerns. Entry into Jerusalem involved symbolic engagement with urban populations, ritual sites, and the temple precincts. Tensions between Jesus, local religious authorities, and Roman oversight escalated during this period, reflecting both the complex religious landscape and the political sensitivities of Roman provincial administration. Temple administration, including the high priest and Sanhedrin, exercised authority over ritual, legal adjudication, and oversight of civic order, positioning Jesus' activity within the intersecting frameworks of law, ritual, and imperial governance. The crucifixion of Jesus occurred under Roman jurisdiction, administered by Pontius Pilate, the prefect of Judea. Crucifixion was a Roman execution method reserved for individuals deemed politically or socially threatening, often associated with sedition, rebellion, or disruption of public order. Historical analysis indicates that the legal process involved accusation, preliminary examination by local authorities, and execution under Roman authority. The crucifixion site, outside Jerusalem near a public road, functioned both as a punitive demonstration and deterrent, consistent with Roman legal and military practices. Post-crucifixion accounts describe the collection of followers' claims regarding appearances, tomb visitation, and the continuity of movement leadership. These events facilitated the consolidation of group identity, the formation of organizational structures, and the articulation of theological interpretation regarding authority, ethical teaching, and social mission. Early followers engaged in communal gatherings, ritual observances, and the dissemination of teachings, forming the foundational network for subsequent religious expansion. Jesus' influence on social, religious, and ethical thought during this period reflects engagement with existing Jewish legal and moral traditions, adaptation to local social and political structures, and articulation of novel interpretive frameworks. Themes central to his ministry included ethical responsibility, social justice, covenantal fidelity, and the interpretation of Torah law. These elements contributed to the formation of group identity, norms of conduct, and frameworks for leadership, instruction, and community organization, shaping the religious and social landscape in Galilee, Judea, and neighboring regions. The Galilean and Judean context provided both opportunity and limitation for Jesus' activity. Local populations were influenced by economic stratification, urban-rural dynamics, and varying exposure to Hellenistic and Roman cultural elements. Fishing villages, agrarian settlements, and urban centers each presented distinct social networks, economic patterns, and religious practices, necessitating adaptive engagement strategies. Interaction with diaspora populations, traveling merchants, and pilgrims facilitated the dissemination of teachings beyond immediate geographic confines, contributing to regional awareness and establishing pathways for future expansion. Education, literacy, and oral culture influenced the methods and reception of Jesus' teachings. Scriptural knowledge, interpretation of legal texts, and mnemonic practices shaped both pedagogy and followership formation. Local oral traditions, combined with exposure to Greek language and literary forms in urban centers, facilitated communication of ethical, legal, and theological instruction across diverse populations. These dynamics contributed to both preservation and adaptation of key teachings, enabling transmission to multiple communities. Socioeconomic dimensions of the period impacted the composition and distribution of followers. Participants included rural laborers, urban artisans, merchants, and religious aspirants, reflecting both economic diversity and social stratification. Kinship networks, village affiliation, and urban residency influenced recruitment, organizational cohesion, and communal activity. Followers provided logistical support, transmission of teachings, and engagement with local authorities, contributing to the operational capacity and sustainability of the movement. Ritual and observance practices were adapted within the framework of existing Jewish law and temple-centered ritual. Participation in festivals, ritual purification, Sabbath observance, and dietary regulation remained central, while interpretive teaching emphasized ethical principles and social responsibility. Integration of ritual observance with ethical instruction facilitated both compliance with tradition and articulation of distinct group identity, supporting cohesion and normative practice in varying social contexts. The Galilean region's topography, settlement distribution, and access to trade routes influenced the geographical spread of activity. rural villages, hillside terracing, fishing settlements along the Sea of Galilee, and trade routes connecting to urban centers facilitated both local engagement and wider dissemination. Travel along these networks enabled systematic teaching, recruitment, and interaction with multiple social strata, contributing to the development of geographically diverse and socially stratified followership. Political and religious dynamics intersect with public health, environmental conditions, and the regional economy. Seasonal agricultural cycles, water availability, and resource distribution influence settlement patterns, occupational activity, and social engagement. Temple authority, local councils, and Roman oversight provided frameworks for dispute resolution, administrative regulation, and social control. These intersecting factors shaped both opportunities for public activity and constraints on mobility, leadership, and influence. Interactions with neighboring regions, including Decapolis, Samaria, and Perea, involved navigation of diverse social, ethnic, and religious contexts. Cultural plurality required awareness of linguistic variation, ritual differentiation, and legal practice, influencing the methods of teaching, organizational formation, and dissemination of normative behavior. The interrelation of local, regional, and imperial factors created a complex environment for social influence and religious articulation. The life and ministry of Jesus are historically situated within the broader patterns of Second Temple Judaism, Roman provincial governance, and Hellenistic cultural influence. Analysis of sources, archaeological evidence, and historical reconstruction demonstrates that activity was integrated with contemporary social structures, legal systems, and economic networks. Ethical teaching, ritual engagement, and leadership were exercised in the context of both continuity with tradition and responsiveness to local socio-political conditions. The period following the death of Jesus of Nazareth, approximately 30 to 33 AD, marks the emergence of the early Christian movement within the broader social, political, and religious framework of the Roman Empire. The early community, initially concentrated in Jerusalem, developed structures for leadership, worship, and teaching while navigating the complexities of Roman provincial administration, local Jewish governance, and diverse socioeconomic conditions. This formative period is documented primarily through the Acts of the Apostles, letters attributed to Paul, and other contemporary epistolary materials, which, when analyzed in conjunction with historical and archaeological evidence, provide insight into the organization, growth, and dynamics of the nascent movement. Jerusalem, situated in Judea, functioned as the initial center of early Christian activity. The city, governed by Roman procurators and administered by local Jewish authorities, including the Sanhedrin and high priest, experienced significant population fluctuations during festivals and pilgrimages. The early Christian community formed within this context, maintaining adherence to Jewish ritual and ethical frameworks while introducing interpretive teachings regarding the significance of Jesus' life, death, and reported resurrection. Socially, the group was composed of men and women from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, including artisans, laborers, and individuals with prior exposure to Jewish law, Hellenistic culture, or diaspora networks. Leadership structures included apostles, elders, and deacons, providing organizational oversight for teaching, communal welfare, and logistical coordination. The phenomenon described in Acts as Pentecost, occurring approximately 30 AD, represents a pivotal moment for the formal organization and expansion of the movement. Following the event, Followers engaged in structured teaching, communal gatherings, and coordinated dissemination of religious instruction. Daily assembly, shared meals, and participation in ritual observance provided mechanisms for reinforcing identity, codifying norms, and sustaining community cohesion within a multi-ethnic urban environment. Population density, mobility along trade and pilgrimage routes, and proximity to temple authority facilitated the spread of teachings and the integration of early organizational structures into both Jewish and wider Roman social networks. Expansion beyond Jerusalem occurred through migration, trade, and mission. Apostolic figures, including Peter and John, traveled within Judea, Samaria, and surrounding provinces, establishing congregations, mediating disputes, and providing instruction. The early community navigated local governance, including Roman and Jewish legal systems, addressing issues such as ritual compliance, intercommunity relations, and adherence to civil law. Conflict with established Jewish authorities arose in cases of interpretive divergence, perceived disruption of social norms, or challenges to temple-centered religious authority. Historical reconstruction situates these tensions within the broader context of sectarian diversity, legal pluralism, and Roman oversight prevalent in the region. The missionary activity of Paul, beginning in the mid-1st century AD, represents a critical expansion of the movement into Asia Minor, Greece, and the wider Mediterranean. Paul, originally a Pharisee from Tarsus with extensive knowledge of Jewish law and Hellenistic culture, utilized both personal networks and urban centers to establish and maintain congregations. His epistolary correspondence provided theological instruction, ethical guidance, and practical direction for communities dispersed across multiple urban and rural settings. Letters addressed issues such as ritual observance, community conflict, social ethics, and integration of Gentile converts, reflecting adaptive strategies for maintaining cohesion, doctrinal consistency, and local engagement across diverse cultural contexts. Urban centers such as Antioch, Ephesus, Corinth, Philippi, and Thessalonica served as strategic loci for early Christian expansion. These cities, characterized by commercial activity, administrative significance, and diverse populations, provided access to trade networks, diaspora communities, and local governance structures. Congregations in these areas navigated complex social hierarchies, economic stratification, and religious plurality, requiring adaptive leadership, mediation of internal disputes, and contextualized instruction. Archaeological evidence, including inscriptions, domestic architecture, and material culture, supports the presence of early Christian groups operating within urban domestic, public, and semi-private spaces. The integration of Gentile converts required negotiation of legal, ritual, and cultural differences. The Council of Jerusalem, convened circa 49 to 50 AD, addressed questions regarding circumcision, dietary law, and observance of Jewish ritual practices for non-Jewish members. Decisions reflected a balance between continuity with Jewish legal tradition and pragmatic adaptation to multicultural environments, facilitating the inclusion of Gentiles while maintaining organizational integrity and theological coherence. The Council's determinations established precedents for leadership authority, conflict resolution, and normative practice in diverse congregations. Persecution, both localized and imperial, influenced community structure, teaching, and expansion. Jewish authorities occasionally sought to suppress what was perceived as heterodox interpretation or social disruption, while Roman oversight targeted activities that might incite civil disturbance or challenge imperial authority. Episodes of arrest, trial, and execution, documented in epistolary accounts, contributed to organizational resilience, codification of ethical conduct, and reinforcement of collective identity. Networks of communication, including itinerant apostles and messengers, facilitated continuity of instruction, coordination of resources, and dissemination of teachings despite local interruptions. Theological development during this period involved the integration of Jewish scriptural heritage with interpretive reflection on the life, death, and reported resurrection of Jesus. Key themes included Christological understanding, ethical instruction, covenantal interpretation, eschatology, and communal responsibility. Epistolary writings, including letters to the Galatians, Corinthians, Romans, and Thessalonians, reflect systematic articulation of doctrine, pastoral guidance, and practical regulation of community life. These texts also address social, economic, and ritual dimensions of congregational experience, illustrating an adaptive and context-sensitive approach to religious instruction. Economic factors influenced the formation and maintenance of early communities. Members contributed resources, shared labor, and participated in collective sustenance strategies to support both local needs and itinerant missionaries. Urban and rural economic structures, including trade, agriculture, craftsmanship, and commerce, affected the composition, mobility, and sustainability of communities. Coordination of resources was managed through leadership structures and communal agreements, facilitating both practical survival and organizational growth. Social dynamics within communities included negotiation of gender, status, and occupational roles. Women participated in leadership, hospitality, and teaching functions, while men provided organizational oversight, theological instruction, and representation in broader networks. Hierarchical and functional distinctions were codified in community norms, epistolary instruction, and practical arrangements, reflecting both inherited cultural patterns and emergent organizational needs. The interplay of social structure, economic capacity, and religious function shaped operational effectiveness and group cohesion. Communication networks facilitated both instruction and dissemination. Travel along Roman roads, maritime routes, and local pathways enabled missionaries to convey teachings, resolve disputes, and integrate dispersed congregations into coherent networks. Use of Greek as a lingua franca enhanced accessibility across culturally diverse populations, while retention of Hebrew and Aramaic in ritual and teaching contexts preserved continuity with Jewish heritage. Letters, personal instruction, and oral teaching function together as complementary mechanisms for maintaining doctrinal consistency, communal identity, and practical guidance. The role of apostolic authority was central to early community organization. Apostles provided teaching, leadership, and adjudication, serving as intermediaries between local congregations and broader networks. Authority structures were reinforced through charismatic recognition, documented instruction, and demonstrated leadership capacity. Mechanisms for accountability included consultation, correspondence, and the appointment of elders, ensuring cohesion and governance within geographically dispersed and socially heterogeneous groups. Integration with broader society required navigation of Roman and local legal frameworks, economic obligations, and religious pluralism. Early Christian communities maintained compliance with imperial regulations concerning taxation, civic duties, and public order, while negotiating distinct religious identity and ethical practice. Interaction with local populations included trade, civic engagement, and cultural adaptation, enabling communities to function within urban and rural environments without provoking undue conflict with authorities or neighbors. Expansion of communities into diaspora regions, including Asia Minor, Greece, and Rome, illustrates the interplay of mobility, social networks, and cultural adaptation. Congregations in major cities leveraged commercial, administrative, and diaspora connections, enabling rapid dissemination of teachings, establishment of supportive networks, and integration into existing Jewish and Hellenistic social structures. Archaeological evidence, including inscriptions, domestic spaces adapted for communal assembly, and artifacts associated with ritual practice, confirms the existence and activity of early communities in diverse urban settings. Persecution and internal conflict prompted the formalization of instruction, doctrinal codification, and ethical regulation. Epistolary literature addressed challenges related to heresy, social discord, and adherence to teaching. Letters functioned as both prescriptive and descriptive instruments, providing normative frameworks, conflict resolution guidance, and theological exposition. This corpus contributed to the consolidation of identity, articulation of communal principles, and preservation of continuity across geographically dispersed communities. Eschatological expectation influenced teaching, communal behavior, and leadership. Belief in imminent divine intervention, judgment, and restoration shaped ethical instruction, social conduct, and organizational decision-making. Epistolary correspondence and missionary teaching emphasized vigilance, moral conduct, and communal cohesion, reflecting engagement with both contemporary social realities and theological interpretation of historical and prophetic texts. The integration of Jewish heritage, Hellenistic cultural forms, and Roman administrative realities produced a distinct organizational and theological identity. Communities combined ritual observance, scriptural interpretation, ethical instruction, and practical governance, enabling survival and expansion in a diverse and often hostile environment. Leadership structures, mobility networks, and codified teaching ensured resilience, adaptability, and the capacity to engage with multi-ethnic and multilingual populations across the Mediterranean. The period from approximately 50 to 95 AD represents a formative phase in the consolidation and expansion of early Christian theology and communal organization through epistolary literature. Apostolic letters, commonly referred to as epistles, constitute a primary mechanism for doctrinal instruction, ethical regulation, and organizational coordination within geographically dispersed communities. This corpus, composed by figures including Paul, James, Peter, John, and other early leaders, reflects the integration of Jewish scriptural heritage, interpretive adaptation to Gentile converts, and responsiveness to socio-political and cultural conditions across the Eastern Mediterranean. Historical analysis situates these writings within urban, economic, and administrative contexts, emphasizing their function as both prescriptive instruments and historical records of early Christian thought, practice, and identity formation. Paul's letters constitute the earliest and most extensive portion of the epistolary corpus, written primarily between 50 and 65 AD. Originating from urban centers including Corinth, Ephesus, and Rome, these letters were directed to diverse congregations navigating the challenges of integration into Greco-Roman society while maintaining distinct religious identity. Paul's correspondence addressed doctrinal issues, including Christological interpretation, justification by faith, and the significance of Jesus' death and reported resurrection, situating these theological themes within the framework of Second Temple Jewish thought and Hellenistic intellectual contexts. Each letter reflects careful attention to local conditions, social composition, and internal disputes, demonstrating both adaptive leadership and systematic teaching methodology. The letters to the Galatians, Romans, Corinthians, and Thessalonians reveal engagement with diverse populations, including Jewish and Gentile converts, urban artisans, merchants, and diaspora communities. Issues of ritual observance, circumcision, dietary law, and Sabbath practices were recurrent topics, reflecting the intersection of inherited Jewish law and emergent Christian identity. Paul's correspondence employed rhetorical strategies, scriptural exegesis, and ethical instruction to address questions of belief, communal cohesion, and social conduct, providing a template for subsequent theological articulation and organizational governance. Letters of James, Peter, and John, likely composed between 60 and 95 AD, reflect complementary theological and ethical concerns. James emphasizes practical ethical conduct, social justice, and faith manifested through works, addressing predominantly Jewish Christian communities within the diaspora. First and Second Peter focus on perseverance amid persecution, ethical behavior, and the reinforcement of apostolic authority, situating local congregations within broader theological frameworks and eschatological expectation. Letters attributed to John articulate themes of love, communal identity, and doctrinal clarification, addressing issues of heresy, schism, and theological misunderstanding in developing communities. The epistolary corpus functioned as a medium for organizational development and conflict resolution. Letters provided instruction on leadership selection, communal roles, and accountability mechanisms, including the appointment of elders, deacons, and teachers, guidance on dispute resolution, economic contributions, and ritual observance facilitated operational continuity and cohesion across multiple urban and rural settings. The standardized forms, greeting conventions, and formulaic exhortations reflect structured literary techniques adapted to the needs of dispersed, multicultural, and multilingual populations. Socioeconomic realities influenced both the content and reception of letters. Communities included individuals engaged in trade, craft production, agriculture, and domestic labor, often with significant economic diversity. Financial contributions, resource allocation, and support for itinerant teachers were critical for sustaining both local congregations and broader mission activities. Letters addressed these practical concerns, outlining norms for equitable distribution, communal responsibility, and ethical engagement with surrounding populations, reflecting the integration of religious practice with daily life and local economic structures. Geopolitical and administrative contexts shaped the dissemination and preservation of epistolary literature. Letters traveled along Roman roads, maritime trade routes, and localized networks facilitated by messengers, traveling teachers, and community leaders. Urban centers such as Ephesus, Corinth, Philippi, Thessalonica, and Rome provided hubs for transmission, reception, and instruction. The use of Koine Greek as the lingua franca enabled communication across culturally and linguistically diverse populations, while retention of Hebrew and Aramaic in ritual and scriptural citation maintained continuity with Jewish textual traditions. Theological development during this period involved both codification and contextual adaptation. Christological interpretation, soteriological frameworks, ecclesiology, and eschatology were articulated with reference to Jewish scriptures, contemporary philosophical concepts, and empirical observation of communal life. Letters emphasized the role of faith, ethical conduct, and covenantal continuity, addressing both individual behavior and collective identity. Exegetically methods included citation of Hebrew scriptures, application of allegorical interpretation, and contextualization within the socio-political realities of Roman provincial governance and urban administration. Hellenistic intellectual and cultural influence is evident in rhetorical strategies, literary forms, and argumentation styles employed in letters. Authors adapted prevailing modes of persuasion, public instruction, and epistolary conventions to communicate effectively with urban, literate, and cosmopolitan audiences. Use of diatribe, exhortation, and logical argumentation enabled engagement with local intellectual expectations, facilitating comprehension, authority, and adherence to normative instruction. Integration of Jewish hermeneutical methods with Hellenistic literary forms illustrates the syncretic intellectual environment in which early Christian theology developed. Persecution and social tension influenced the content and tone of letters. Communities faced both local resistance from Jewish authorities and broader pressures from Roman governance, particularly in cases of perceived subversion, sedition, or violation of social norms. Letters addressed issues of endurance, legal compliance, and ethical conduct under duress, guiding the maintenance of communal integrity and moral identity. Instruction included strategies for managing internal conflict, resisting divisive influence, and sustaining commitment to doctrinal and ethical principles despite external pressures. The expansion of Gentile membership necessitated negotiation of identity and ritual practice. Letters systematically addressed questions of circumcision, dietary observance, festival participation, and engagement with broader cultural norms. Epistles illustrate both flexibility in ritual adaptation and retention of core ethical and theological principles, enabling integration of diverse populations while maintaining communal cohesion. Instruction emphasizes unity, mutual accountability, and adherence to interpretive frameworks that grounded identity in both Jewish heritage and emerging Christian theology. The epistolary corpus also functions as a historical record, reflecting social, economic, and cultural conditions of the period. References to household organization, patronage systems, communal hierarchy, and local disputes provide insight into daily life and social structure in first-century urban and rural contexts. Integration of practical instruction with theological discourse demonstrates the interrelation of material, social, and spiritual dimensions in the development of early communities, offering a multifaceted view of organizational and cultural evolution. Leadership structures within communities evolved in response to practical needs and theological priorities. Apostolic authority, elder oversight, and deacon service provided mechanisms for instruction, resource management, and dispute resolution. Selection processes, tenure, and responsibilities were codified in correspondence, reflecting systematic approaches to governance compatible with dispersed, culturally diverse, and socioeconomically heterogeneous communities. These structures provided continuity, stability, and adaptability, supporting growth and integration across the Eastern Mediterranean. Ethical instruction, a central feature of epistolary literature, emphasized relational conduct, justice, compassion, and communal responsibility. Letters addressed interactions with family members, neighbors, patrons, and authorities, codifying norms for behavior that balanced adherence to emerging theological principles with practical engagement in daily life. Ethical frameworks incorporated precedent from Jewish law, prophetic instruction, and practical experience, providing a comprehensive guide for conduct in diverse social, economic, and political contexts. Ritual and communal observance remained significant, with letters addressing both continuity with Jewish tradition and adaptation for emerging Christian identity. Practices related to communal meals, prayer, ritual purification, and festival observance were codified to reinforce cohesion and identity. Instruction ensured that both internal order and external compliance were maintained, providing structured mechanisms for social and religious stability across dispersed populations. Eschatological expectation continued to shape instruction and organization. Letters reflect belief in imminent divine intervention, judgment, and restoration, influencing ethical conduct, communal behavior, and missionary activity. Apocalyptic and prophetic interpretation informed teaching, providing a theological rationale for resilience, moral responsibility, and adherence to leadership directives. This eschatological framework also served as a motivating principle for expansion, ethical compliance, and maintenance of communal identity under diverse and challenging conditions. Literacy, textual preservation, and transmission methods contributed to the durability and dissemination of epistolary instruction. Use of codices, scrolls, and oral recitation complemented personal instruction, enabling replication, cross-regional transmission, and integration into developing organizational networks. Communities maintained copies for reference, instruction, and archival purposes, facilitating doctrinal consistency, practical guidance, and historical documentation across both urban and rural settings. The letters collectively provide a framework for understanding the integration of theology, ethics, social organization, and practical instruction in early Christian communities. They reveal the interaction of doctrinal development with local and regional conditions, the role of leadership in maintaining cohesion, and the strategies employed to navigate complex cultural, social, and political environments. Analysis demonstrates that the epistolary corpus functioned as both an instrument of instruction and a record of historical development, reflecting adaptive, context-sensitive, and systematic approaches to organizational, ethical, and theological challenges. The Book of Revelation, traditionally attributed to John of Patmos, is situated historically around AD 95, during the latter part of the 1st century, under the Roman imperial period. Patmos, a small island in the Aegean Sea, functioned as a place of exile within the Roman provincial system, where individuals perceived as politically or socially threatening could be isolated from broader civic and religious communities. Historical evidence indicates that Patmos was sparsely populated, with limited agricultural capacity, small harbors facilitating maritime traffic, and a network of caves and rudimentary dwellings suitable for temporary habitation or detention. Roman administration exercised oversight through regional authorities, ensuring compliance with imperial law while permitting localized civil and military operations to maintain order. The composition of Revelation reflects both local and broader geopolitical conditions of the Roman Empire in the late 1st century. The Roman Empire was administratively divided into provinces, with governance structures including procurators, legates, and military commanders. Judea, Asia Minor, and surrounding provinces were integrated into these systems, and the urban centers of Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea, addressed within the text, functioned as administrative, commercial, and religious hubs. These cities were characterized by complex social hierarchies, economic activity involving trade, crafts, and agriculture, and the presence of multiple religious cults, including emperor worship, local deities, and syncretic Hellenistic traditions. Christian communities in Asia Minor during this period operated within diverse social and religious environments. Communities were typically small, urban, and comprised of individuals from varied socioeconomic backgrounds, including artisans, merchants, and households. Members navigated relationships with Roman authorities, local civic structures, and Jewish populations. Tensions arose due to perceived challenges to imperial cult practices, deviations from normative civic participation, and internal doctrinal disagreements. Early Christian communities maintained cohesion through shared teaching, ritual observance, and ethical conduct, often under conditions of social and political pressure. John's writing addresses the state of these communities, emphasizing both theological instruction and practical guidance for survival and cohesion. The epistolary elements directed to the 7 churches in Asia Minor provide historical insight into local conditions, including economic challenges, social stratification, internal disputes, and pressures from external authorities. Letters reference adherence to ethical norms, correction of doctrinal errors, and encouragement of resilience in the face of persecution. Specific cities cited in the correspondence correspond to historically documented urban centers with civic administration, trade networks, and religious pluralism. The text employs symbolic language to convey both theological and social realities. Imagery drawn from Hebrew scriptures, including prophetic and apocalyptic texts, provides interpretive frameworks that reflect continuity with Jewish interpretive traditions while addressing contemporary circumstances. The symbolism includes references to imperial authority, socioeconomic systems, ritual practice, and cosmic metaphor, providing a means to articulate concerns regarding power, justice, and community endurance under the constraints of Roman governance and localized social pressures. Historical reconstruction situates the composition in a period of heightened imperial vigilance under Domitian, with documented instances of administrative action against individuals and groups perceived as subversive. Christian communities were often categorized as sects, with membership constituting both religious and social identity markers. The Roman response included monitoring of assemblies, enforcement of taxes and imperial cult obligations, and occasional punitive measures for those who resisted civic and religious conformity. Letters and visions addressed these pressures, providing theological interpretation and guidance for maintaining ethical conduct and communal solidarity. Theological themes within the text emphasize divine sovereignty, eschatological expectation, and moral accountability. Concepts of judgment, reward, and cosmic struggle are integrated with practical instructions for community life, ethical behavior, and maintenance of identity under external pressures. Apocalyptic imagery, including depictions of cosmic conflict, divine agents, and symbolic catastrophes, functions as a communicative device to convey both historical and spiritual realities, providing a framework for understanding immediate challenges in relation to the overarching divine narrative. The depiction of persecution and endurance reflects historical realities of 1st century Asia Minor. Communities faced sporadic harassment, social marginalization, and economic pressure due to non-participation in civic religious observances. Leadership structures within communities, including elders and prophetic figures, facilitated coordination, moral instruction, and logistical support. Letters and visions underscore the need for perseverance, adherence to ethical norms, and fidelity to theological principles as mechanisms for sustaining group cohesion, identity, and operational continuity in adverse conditions. Symbolic elements within Revelation correspond to identifiable socio-political and religious structures. References to imperial authority, represented symbolically, correspond to administrative and military oversight, taxation, and legal obligations imposed by Roman governance. Imagery of local cultic practice and urban religious hierarchy reflects the pluralistic religious environment of Asia Minor, including temples dedicated to local deities, emperor worship, and syncretic Hellenistic traditions. Apocalyptic vision functions to critique, interpret, and guide behavior within this complex milieu, providing instruction relevant to both internal community organization and external socio-political navigation. The narrative framework integrates temporality and geography, situating events within identifiable regions while employing symbolic chronology to convey theological meaning. Sequential depiction of conflict, judgment, and resolution mirrors historical pressures faced by dispersed communities, while providing a systematic theological interpretation of endurance, divine justice, and communal fidelity. Instructions for ethical conduct, ritual observance, and social engagement are embedded within these frameworks, demonstrating the interplay between historical circumstance and theological articulation. Economic conditions influenced community behavior, resilience, and instruction. Trade networks, market participation, and occupational engagement were central to survival, social status, and community interaction. Letters address ethical participation in economic life, equitable treatment of community members, and engagement with wider social structures. Integration of ethical instruction with practical economic guidance illustrates adaptive strategies for maintaining group cohesion, avoiding conflict with external authorities, and ensuring communal sustainability. Social composition of communities included households, kinship networks, and occupational guilds. Leadership was distributed among elders, teachers, and itinerant figures, with authority derived from demonstrated knowledge, moral integrity, and communal recognition. Communication networks, including letter transmission, itinerant teaching, and oral instruction, enabled coordination across urban centers and rural peripheries. These mechanisms ensured doctrinal consistency, organizational continuity, and practical management of dispersed populations. Apocalyptic expectation provided both motivational and interpretive frameworks. Belief in imminent divine intervention, judgment, and restoration shaped ethical behavior, leadership decisions, and communal priorities. Communities interpreted historical events, socio-political pressures, and internal disputes within the framework of eschatological expectation, providing context for perseverance, resistance to coercion, and ethical conduct under duress. Symbolic representation of cosmic struggle allowed for articulation of historical and spiritual realities, linking localized experience to universal theological themes. Literary techniques employed in Revelation, including repetition, numeric symbolism, and allegorical imagery, functioned as mnemonic and pedagogical devices. These techniques facilitated communication of complex ideas across populations with varied literacy and linguistic competence. Integration of visual metaphor, narrative sequencing, and exhortative instruction enabled instruction, cohesion, and interpretive clarity, ensuring that communities could navigate immediate historical pressures while maintaining theological and ethical frameworks. The transmission, preservation, and reception of revelation reflect both local and broader networks of communication. Copies were maintained within congregations, shared among communities, and interpreted by leaders for instruction and guidance. Written and oral dissemination complemented direct instruction, facilitating integration of dispersed communities into a coherent interpretive tradition. Archaeological and textual evidence support the existence of codified transmission mechanisms, including reliance on trusted messengers, compilation of authoritative texts, and community-based instruction. Eschatological imagery, while symbolic, corresponds to identifiable historical and social phenomena. Depiction of persecution, social marginalization, and conflict with civic authorities mirrors documented historical conditions of first-century Christian communities in Asia Minor. Economic, political, and religious pressures are encoded in symbolic language, providing interpretive frameworks for understanding both immediate experience and broader cosmic and theological narratives. Ethical instruction is embedded within this framework, linking practical behavior to theological expectation and communal survival. The narrative integrates cosmological, ethical, and historical dimensions, providing comprehensive guidance for communities operating under conditions of political oversight, social marginalization, and religious plurality. Leadership, organizational structure, and ethical instruction are interwoven with apocalyptic vision, reflecting adaptive strategies for sustaining cohesion, doctrinal integrity, and social functioning. The text demonstrates systematic engagement with historical context, theological interpretation, and practical guidance, illustrating the interplay of temporal circumstance and interpretive instruction in early Christian communities.